All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Actually, James, do we need to do a roll call?
You can make just basic introductions around the room for the record.
All right, yeah, we'll do a roll call starting on my left here.
Paul Reinders, City of Pittsburgh, representing Transplant.
Eric Hughes, City of Pleasant Hill, representing CBPAC.
Bill Pinkham from WCTAC.
Robert Sarmiento, Contra Costa County and Chair.
Ole Olson, Citizen Appointee of Transplant.
Corey Riley, WCTAC.
All right, thank you. We'll go to item B, public comment. Do we have any members of the public who'd like to comment on any item that's not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll go to item C, approval of summary of actions for the Countywide Bike and Ped Advisory Committee summary of actions from July 22nd, 2019.
So move.
Move approval.
Sorry, my name is misspelled.
I withdraw my movement.
All right, actually,
I'll move with the name correction.
all right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion from Eric and a second from Paul. A motion to approve the minutes with a correction for the name. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I think that's unanimous. All right, we'll move to item 1.0. It's proposed updates to the 501 Contra Costa Bike Rack and Locker Program. James, you have a staff report for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair and Committee. This item is being brought to you for feedback from this committee. We are interested in receiving advice on potential next steps for this program, and the background is provided in the staff report, but in summary, there is a bike rack and locker program that 511 Contra Costa helps manage using Air Quality District and Measure J funds, where interested parties from around the county are eligible to apply for new bicycle racks and or lockers, basically bicycle storage options that are publicly accessible. And they receive numerous requests throughout the year and are looking for ways to make the system more efficient, basically from intake to implementation. And the program operates with guidelines that were approved in 2015, and those are attached to the report for your reference. We are interested to hear feedback on the guidelines themselves as well, if this committee thinks that there's room for improvement in terms of clarification or best practices to be considered. But I would like to focus your attention on at least two options that are being proposed in the staff report as first steps to help optimize the bike rack and locker program review process. And one of them would be to update the guidelines themselves, as I just mentioned, the attachment to this report. And one way to perform this update would be to conduct research of local regulations for installation of bicycle storage facilities throughout the county. So it could be an appendix to this guideline, for example, that catalogs the existing encroachment process or options for obtaining an encroachment permit, for example, to install racks in county X or city X within the county. And keep in mind that there are 19 cities and towns plus the county. The second option could be to create a detailed database of existing and proposed bicycle parking infrastructure types, basically going into more detail in the guidelines or through a mapping exercise to actually catalog pretty much every bicycle storage facility within the county, and that would provide a database and an understanding of where there is that type of accessibility to keep a bike safe while not in use. Because as we know, it is an important factor in determining whether someone chooses to ride from point A to point B and store their bicycle. And so staff notes that at least one of these options is more intensive than the other. We are not necessarily precluding either option, but we are interested in understanding the committee's perspective on whether it thinks one or the other or both are worthy of going forward, and also in receiving any other ideas that it has to help make the process more efficient and in turn continue implementing the bike ped plan that was adopted last summer. So that is essentially the recommendation. It is an open-ended feedback session, and we are happy to receive your comments. So we'll take questions as well if you have them.
All right, thank you, James. Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you, James. Any of the committee members have any questions or comments? Corey?
I just want to say I don't think it's necessarily a conflict of interest or whatnot, but I do manage this program in West County. So if there is anything to vote on, I wouldn't be voting on it.
Okay, thank you. Bruce?
I don't see a page number on this, but it's two-thirds of the way through the handout. We're talking about how far apart the racks should be, 30 inches minimum. I'd like to see that up to 36 inches minimum for the inverted U or the inverted U with the bar, which is my favorite kind of rack, because I have baskets on my bicycle, and we're seeing more and more cargo bikes, and I can just barely fit my bicycle between 30-inch wide standards. So if the rack is crowded, I'm out in the cold. Okay.
To clarify, you're referring to the diagram that indicates 30-inch horizontal spacing, and you're expanding that to 36 instead?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a 1-9 on the bottom right corner of the page. It's an illustration number indicating no wheel bender racks to help you find the page.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Paul?
Yeah, I like Ole's idea of making it 36 inches. That gives you some room to maneuver between the bikes as well. However, again, it's a trade-off. Obviously, when there's development, this sidewalk area and these areas are very expensive to develop. It's a trade-off, I guess. But I'm thinking maybe a compromise is certainly we need some aisles with 36, but maybe in between we could allow the 30-inch. So what I'm saying is every other aisle 36-inch.
I'd find that acceptable. I'd also like to see these inverted U racks close to the front of a building, parallel to the front of a building, so that only one bike could use it, but it would not require a very wide sidewalk. I can talk more about this. Is everybody following what I'm saying? Parallel to the front of the storefront, close to the front of the storefront, the inverted U, so that only one bike parks against it. So the rack would be 4 or 5 inches from the storefront. All right. So the width of the bicycle would be, whatever it is, but the bike would be parked parallel to the sidewalk. So if we had any kind of a reasonable width sidewalk, the bicycle could be parked there without requiring aisles worth many square feet of space to make an aisle for these inverted U's. We'd have a series of them spaced, say, 6-7 feet apart, and then put only 1 or 2 in front of the store to start with, and then if those are are heavily used, we could put more. Does that make any sense?
Thank you, Bruce. Corey?
I just had two comments on that. So for the funding for this, it comes largely from the Air District, and so they have maximums that we're allowed to ask for reimbursement for. And right now the maximums are $250 per bicycle parking space. So that means that a U rack or whatever rack that you could normally fit two bikes on can have a maximum reimbursement of $500. And with rising costs and federal steel tariffs and all that going on, $500 is about what they cost now. So that doesn't even include labor. And so we generally have to find other sources of funding, such as Measure J or something like that, to pay with labor. Or we'll often ask the people who were installing the racks to cover the labor themselves. So we sort of need to have we need to have two bikes parked on them to make them pencil out. But that's not necessarily I'm not saying it's not a good idea or we shouldn't do that or whatever, but that from a practical standpoint, it does help us with our funding to be able to say that two bikes are going to park on there. And then I would also wonder if those would, if your suggestion would contradict any local regulations. I imagine cities and stuff would probably have rules against that, but I'm not sure.
Right, thank you. Bill?
I think the problem with parking that close to the storefront is you get a lot of flack from the store owners and managers. You wouldn't be able to get in there easily to wash the windows or paint or something like that. So I don't think that's a good idea. I also have a question. How much money do we have in the pot so far for this?
Well, to my understanding, it's distributed between the two sources. It's distributed to each regional transportation planning committee to apply for transportation demand management programs. I would need to research exact figures, but I do have a representative from Contra Costa 511, Kirsten Riker. Are you able to offer any figures? Yeah, we could do a lookup on that, and that's a segue to a point in the report that I would like to mention, that based on the feedback today, staff intends to return to this committee with an updated proposal using the information received. So if more specific dollar amounts are necessary to help move this effort forward, then we can research that.
All right, Paul?
Yeah, my comment on Oli's comment is I think we need to remain flexible. I like the idea of putting one up against the wall. That a lot of times that's the only place you can fit in a bike rack in existing infrastructure. But in new development, obviously, you have more flexibility. But as far as flexibility, I think we've got to remain a little more flexible instead of dictating that it should be up against the wall, but maybe allow something like that. And then I had a question, too, about the 511, is what parking proposals do they review? Could you give me an example of what proposals you have reviewed for bike parking? It says, or maybe staff, excuse me a minute. In the course of this work, 511cc periodically receives requests for new bike parking infrastructure from public and private entities, 10 per year. I'm wondering what those are.
Sure, and Kirsten can talk about her experience with this as well, but generally requests, there's an online request form on the 511 Contra Costa website where people can submit that they're interested in seeing some bike racks. They're also, it's part of our outreach. So when we're working with schools, employers, cities, whatever, that's part of the offering of the 511 Contra Costa. And so people can come to us directly and ask for them. And so that's actually where most of my bike racks that I've helped install come from, is working with cities and employers who are just interested in having that, there for either, a city amenity or for their, employers or employees.
Okay, so it's
So yeah, so they come to us, and then we look at the site. We usually do a site visit. They work with the bike rack manufacturers, come up with an estimate, and then we approve the estimate and say what part of that we're going to pay for and whatnot, and it gets done. And we've now switched to working on a reimbursement basis. It used to be that at least our office would front the money for the whole project, but now we're doing it on a reimbursement basis, which I think is held off on some people applying for it.
Thank you.
Did you want to add anything, Kirsten?
Yeah, our office, we typically do not fund the installation costs of installing new. Oh, sure. Hi. So our office typically does not pay for installation costs for businesses and things like that. And when we fund it at schools, usually there's obviously a maintenance department that goes ahead and puts it in there for us. New development, usually there's a requirement for how many, so we wouldn't fund that. That would be on the developer to pay for racks. So that's part of the approval process for us.
So you are involved as far as location of these bike racks?
Yeah, we have
Great.
gone out to businesses and checked the site and made recommendations. But
Great.
we also, since we don't pay for installation, we require if it's a business, we went to an art store recently, a year ago maybe, and they wanted a bike rack, and we said, okay, but we need permission from your property owner, management, that you can put it in here, and we, sometimes we never hear back because the property owner doesn't want to get involved, so.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Good.
James, I have a question just regarding, let me bring it up here, option 2. Can you provide more details? Like, would a study need to be done, or just creation of a database, and would it be under 501 Contra Costa or CCTA? I guess if you can provide more detail on the second option.
Yeah. To be frank, it is something that we would need to flesh out as a more formal proposal in advance of the next committee meeting. But our starting point, one of the concepts we have, is based on an existing 511 or a map that's available on the 511 website that indicates all of the E-Link bike lockers and each of those locations. And the thought was, well, that's one type of bicycle storage facility. Is there a way to make it more robust where we can include each of rack locations and even corrals if they're available in the county and on public and private property? And one of the ways that this could be done to make it as cost effective as possible is to recruit local advocacy organizations such as Bike East Bay, Bike Concord, Bike Walnut Creek to help pitch in and conduct that kind of survey. And so we could gather that information and then basically make it visually available through an online map. And we would treat this the same way existing online vehicle parking databases occur, where if one wants to know where to park in advance of their trip, those are typically more readily available. So that's the concept that we're building on.
All right, thanks. And can I add one other, one comment regarding this database? Would it be possible, in addition to bike racks, bike lockers, like, can they have, what's the word trying to think of here, like bike shops or bike, any other kind of bicycle facilities to help, inform bicyclists? Like I said, like we have that bike shop here in Contra Costa Center, things like that. Could that be part of the database as well?
I think that's reasonable. We would want to be as inclusive as possible, and we would also think that that there would be multiple iterations. So while there's a version 1 where you collect as much data as possible, it could be continually updated as new information becomes available or installations occur. As Kirsten mentioned, sometimes private developments, as stipulated by the local permitting agency, will install, and it may be publicly accessible, but we don't know about it until we would actually survey it.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
We've actually talked about adding on to the current 511 Contra Costa bike mapper, various bicycle amenities. Okay. Well, anyway, we're talking about adding bike amenities such as water bottle refilling stations, bike fix-it stations, bike parking could be on there, bike shops, things like that could all go into the bike mapper.
Okay, thanks. Actually, yes, the correct word I was trying to think of, bicycle amenities. So, thank you. Before we continue with more comments, I do have a public speaker card here, so I'd like to call up Mr. Yamada. If you could state your full name and who you're affiliated with, please.
Sure. My name is Kenji Yamada, and I'm here for Bike Concord. So regarding the database thing that was just discussed, Bike Concord already has a Google map, which has bicycle parking current locations and desired locations in Concord mapped on there. And we have, basically the way we do it, it's a Google map. It's a custom map that you can make on Google Maps. And we have a layer for standards compliant parking, a layer for substandard parking, and then a layer for desired locations. And by doing that, you can kind of have different icons and people can turn those layers on and off. So that's one way to allow those kinds of distinctions for the user. And by substandard, generally we mean things like the types of rack which existing guidelines rule out for subsidies, like wave racks that don't allow 2 points of contact, and also those that are incorrectly placed so as not to allow correct placement of a bicycle. Those are all, we put them on the substandard bike rack layer. The idea was brought up of local organizations like ours helping with gathering that data, and we certainly would be happy to do so and to work together with 501cc and CCTA to get that together. Regarding the existing subsidy program, I really echo what was said earlier about there being some barriers for a lot of employers and businesses that want to take advantage of this program in the fact that they have to do a lot of the legwork. They have to pay the costs up front for purchase and delivery of the hardware, and I think are not reimbursed at all for the cost of installation. I've talked to quite a few people at organizations and businesses who are kind of interested in getting bike parking, but they don't have the time or interest to do anything. They're just willing to sign a piece of paper and say, yes, that's all right. So what I'd like to be able to bring them, and I've talked about seeing if Bike Concord's resources could be brought into this, what I'd like to bring them is basically a turnkey package. Just say, all you have to do is sign this, go out with me to identify a place, and sign a piece of paper saying, yes, you may install here, and we'll take care of the rest. We'll get the concrete work done. We'll do all of it. You need to do nothing else. I think that's what it will take to get the parking actually installed in a very large number of cases. So Bike Concord, we have some funds we could allocate to that, but we'd love to talk with 501cc and CCTA about working that out. We've discussed this internally in Bike Concord about what our role could be and what we could contribute, and there is some feeling that a business should have some buy-in and not have it completely be free of effort on their part. So they maybe should make be required to make some kind of commitments for maintenance of some kind, at least keeping the space clear and clean. Maybe I think there might be some financial costs of upkeep that maybe they could be asked to assume if they're very modest. And then the third thing I want to bring up is bike corrals. You guys discussed the trouble of allocating sufficient right-of-way and a sidewalk and how valuable that space is. When some of the road right-of-way has already been allocated to the storage of one type of vehicle, the motor vehicle, it seems to me pretty reasonable to take one spot to allocate for the space for the other type of vehicle with this body CCTA is trying to promote. And I know local jurisdictions have the say on that, and CCTA can't just snap its fingers and make anything happen. But I think for an organization and for jurisdictions that claim to be promoting the bicycle as a form of transportation, that should be a given. That road right-of-way, which is appropriate to use for storing cars, is also appropriate to use for storing bicycles. And that solves the problem of taking precious sidewalk right-of-way, which pedestrians need. I know Walnut Creek in its downtown has just planned to put in its first bike corral at the coffee shop location on, I think it's on Locust. So I think that should be encouraged if possible, and maybe if it might be possible to offer some kind of preference to subsidizing that kind of installation to encourage that kind of thing, that would really help with the right-of-way question. I think that's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, just a quick question. Is your bike facility map online?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry. It's available at parking.bikeconcord.org.
Oh, and James, if I could ask if you could send that website out to the CBPAC, please, that'd be great. Eric?
Just for my clarification, I guess, I understand 501 Country Club has a program, has a design standard and a guideline for bike facility, parking facility. But like Kirsten kind of hinted, most of the, at least for Pleasant Hill, most of the bike parking facilities are installed as part of development projects. Whenever there's a development project going in, especially commercial development, would you guys technically have, I mean, you wouldn't be involved from that perspective, correct, in regarding design and location of these bike parking facilities?
We would happily go out and help consult as requested by the business owner, but
You wouldn't, yeah. Unless approached basically voluntarily, you wouldn't be involved. Okay. So I think that's one of the, and that's something that we may have to start thinking about is how do you, not just Pleasant Hill, but as a county, how do we loop you guys in, so to speak? Because I would say guesstimating 80%, 90% of bike parking facilities in the county are installed by private developers as part of the development process, which does not involve 501 Contra Costa. And so we can, in theory, propose whatever we want, but it wouldn't impact the majority of the location and design or implementation of bike parking in the county. And I would think it's, you know, for these kind of project applications, they'll be falling back on the local codes or design guidelines, if there are any, as a guide. And I know Pleasant Hill, we definitely do not have a design guideline for bicycle parking, locations or design standard. If anything, we probably have more of a number of parking stalls, bike parking stalls they need to incorporate as part of a project based on the square footage and so forth. So a certain size need to have X number of bicycle parking, but we didn't even specify, you know, long-term parking versus short-term parking. You know, like a hotel site, for example. In theory, you know, for a hotel which is more long-term, potentially long-term use, overnight use, so to speak, in theory, it'll be nice if countywide have some kind of a policy that says, for these kind of projects, you need to have 50% long-term, 50% short-term, short-term meaning like a bike rack, for example. But right now it's sporadic across the county, and I don't think there's any uniformity. It's kind of up to each individual jurisdiction, possibly the traffic engineer who reviews these projects to condition the project to do a little bit more and above beyond if they feel called to do that. And so I don't know if there's a way for us to loop, in this case, 501 Contra Costa or any kind of equivalent agencies in to be part of that review process or at least comment process. Otherwise, I don't think we're making a very big impact.
Yeah, I think the point's well taken. It is recognized, one of the ideas, or one of the reasons why the idea of inventorying local regulations, whether through development review processes or just the right-of-way access, is to at least perhaps make the information more accessible, because as we understand it, in some cases applicants such as, you know, local art business owners are simply looking for the first step, or what is the right question to even ask. And the idea being that if we can at least present more information up front, and then that could help the decision-making process even before it reaches our colleagues' desks. And that's one way to help streamline the process, not to be precluding any opportunities, but simply to be more informed during the review process, or even making a decision whether to go through with it, we think could be a benefit.
All right, Bill?
I like your idea of having the citywide plan and letting people know where the racks and things are. Makes me think that we ought to do a countywide map, and as an attachment maybe to the countywide bike ped plan or something. individual bike groups could publicize it to their members and Bike East Bay. I don't know any other county that's doing anything like that, but boy, that would be kind of neat. I live in Richmond, but I'm going to Walnut Creek and I'm going to this place, and gee, is there any parking in the area? You know, that sort of thing. I would really like something like that.
Corey?
Just to the idea of inventory and new development and all that stuff, this program could help fill the gaps that aren't being filled by, new development. So if that is where, 80-90% of the new bike racks are coming, having an inventory and understanding, what part of the, county is, already built out, but doesn't have bike racks, whatever, this program could come in and help fill those gaps for the bike parking.
Thank you. And I have an additional comment as well. I was thinking about that as well. If this database or map or inventory, could it show areas where there should be some proposed bike racks, or areas where there's a lack of bike facilities? And I think about that just because I know recently there was that the Air District had a grant program, where they were going to fund bicycle racks and lockers, and it would be nice if we could refer back to this database or map showing, this map shows locations of proposed bike racks, or shows, all right, there's a lack of bicycle racks or lockers in this area, and that's why this proposed bike locker would be a good candidate for this grant to include to implement at this specific location. So yeah, just if the map could show areas where, and maybe even it would show, as I think Eric mentioned earlier, commercial areas. Maybe there's some commercial areas that would typically have bike racks that don't have it, identifying those areas. All right, Bruce?
Thank you, Chair Sarmiento. People don't die from lack of bike parking. If we spend a lot of staff time and money on creating this database of bike parking places, where's that money going to come from? And if it's going to come from building bicycle facilities on the street, then I think we should think seriously about that. Because as Paul said, he saw 2 crashes today. Neither of them involved bike parking. Okay, so that's one thing I wanted to say. Second, I'd like to follow on with what Eric had to say. 100% he's right. The architects don't have the information, so they don't design the bike parking the way we who ride bikes want to see it. So I would like to agree with him completely that requesting that each city adopt the bicycle parking design specifications into the city's not general plan, but some function of the city's paperwork, so that when the developer comes to the city, the planner can say, oh yeah, in our paperwork XYZ, you have to include that sort of design. I think that would get us somewhere inexpensively. We shove the cost onto the city, except for the expense of creating the design guidelines that we have, except for 36-inch width occasionally, already written. Thank you.
All right, Paul?
Thank you. It would be nice if we could require cities to do things. I don't think we have the power to do that, although it's a nice idea. I came in this morning thinking that I was going to recommend option 1 as far as what is going to achieve the objective here to facilitate this review process by 511 Contra Costa, and I thought number 1 was the best option there. However, hearing all these comments, I think the idea of a database like a GIS file or something of parking infrastructure is a really nice idea. There's a benefits beyond what I thought there would be. So I'm thinking we should look to do both. Of course, prioritize option number 1, but maybe look for volunteers and things like that to try to come up with this database of the parking. I think that's a good idea, especially the long-term parking. Maybe start there. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments from the committee? Or actually, is it all right if the Kenji comes up again?
Well, technically, public comment is, once, unless there were another card that could be donated for the time has been spent. So
Okay.
I apologize, but we can converse offline if additional comments were to be sent to staff.
Okay, that's fine. All right. So no other comments from the committee. James, is there? It looks like there needs to be some action. Looking at the agenda, it says there's.
Well, so the committee could give direction to staff to take the feedback given today to prepare a more detailed proposal on how to accomplish one or either option 1 or 2 or both. From where I sit, there seems to be interest in both options, exploring both options, so we could craft a proposal that would put dollar figures or estimated dollar figures on the level of effort and possibly the timing required to accomplish these options, recognizing from the get-go that given all the other commitment that this authority has, it may be in a staggered fashion, but we can give you that information at the next opportunity that this committee meets. So if there is consensus, we can take that direction and go forward, unless there's a different direction that the committee prefers.
Does that sound fine with everybody here, the committee? Okay. Do we have to make a formal motion, or?
I think if the chair would just to state that there is consensus to take feedback and craft a more detailed proposal on these 2 options, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Staff, please. Yeah. We'll craft a more detailed proposal. Thank you. Okay, I see we have one more major item on the agenda here, but I'm first ask the committee if you want to continue with item 2 or you want to take a lunch break.
Food.
I say go for it. I don't think the second item is going to take too long.
Okay, all right. Sorry, overruled Bruce.
So we have 2 options for lunch or no. Us fat people have troubles. What can I say?
All right, we'll move on to item number 2 here. Request for volunteers to serve on the Vision Zero working group to develop the Contra Costa Vision Zero framework and systemic safety approach. And James?
Thank you, Chair. This is an item that was recently also presented to the Technical Coordinating Committee last week. And the essence is that per authority board direction, staff is embarking on a Vision Zero framework and systemic safety approach with the ultimate objective of creating technical procedures for local jurisdictions to implement Vision Zero principles in their transportation planning and engineering practices. This also does coincide, at least at the moment, with the proposed transportation expenditure plan Vision Zero policy. Of course, that is subject to a vote by the populace, assuming that it is even approved to be put on the ballot. But for purposes of this meeting, staff is asking for 4 volunteers from this committee in particular to help guide consultant and staff work on this effort. And the technical procedures, we are hoping to complete the scope of work by the end of 2020. So approximately 16 months from now, that would be the duration of this term. We are scoping approximately 6 meetings, so about every other month, just to give you an idea of the level of commitment that may be required. It may not be 6 meetings altogether, but that's right now in concept. And the other nuance to this request is that we are hoping for one representative from this committee from each of the each of the sub-regions, so West County, Central County, East County, and Southwest. So we put that before you today. We understand that if you wish to consult with colleagues, if you don't feel that you have the time, but you think someone else does from this committee, you can certainly consult with them, and we can take in the nomination after the fact. But we are happy to hear any nominations up front right now so that we can begin forming this group and planning the initial meeting. So I'll be happy to take questions if you have any.
All right, thanks, James. Any questions? Or we'll go with Corey first.
Just because I know that Bill's going to jump on it. I believe that this is coming to our technical advisory committee meeting in October, and so we're going to be discussing it there for representatives from West County. So before you jump on it, you can state your intentions, but I think that we're also going to be discussing this at our TAC.
I'd be happy to serve on that committee, speaking as someone who's been hit a couple of times. Love to work on it with the one caveat that it doesn't interfere with other meetings I'm having. But you expect it to be those meetings to happen during the day.
Yeah, that is most likely. It would be during business hours because we will be working with consultants and other staff as well.
Okay, Paul?
Yes, just to clarify, we're looking for volunteers from this committee, this advisory committee, correct? Not from
that's the
TAC.
request. That's
Right.
the request.
So, and can I nominate myself? Because I'd like to volunteer for transplant.
That is fine. Thank you.
All right, any other comments, questions? Bruce?
If you could put up with me, I'd volunteer also.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. Actually, because you said 4 volunteers, does it have to be one from each sub-region? Because if we already have Paul, I guess if you could clarify if it has to be from each sub-region.
You are understanding correctly. We are requesting at least one from each region. So Paul putting his hat in the ring from East County, that could be a discussion you have offline, and you can follow up with staff if you want to debate the nomination, or you can leave it to the RTPC to formalize that.
But Ole is not on the RTPC.
That's correct, but since we are asking for volunteers, the RTPC could make that decision if it feels more comfortable, similar to what the TCC requested, that they go back to the RTPCs to help them make a decision who should participate.
Will these be public meetings?
As far as I understand, the RTPC meetings are public, at least at the board level. Oh, I'm sorry. Division 0, these will be working group meetings. We aren't intending for them to have Brown Act requirements because they're not elected officials. This is for purposes that there would be reporting out to the public at certain milestones, such as when the draft technical procedures are being taken to local jurisdictions as requested, but this is for purposes of developing a technical document.
Eric?
Question. And since I'm on this committee and also the technical coordinating committee, I know on TCC you're also asking for volunteers from each of the RTPCs, but that obviously could be staff from the RTPCs. I think we mentioned that last week. So I'm just looking among the group here. I think I'm the only person, except for Robert, probably from Central County. Well, you're probably county in general. Yeah. And yet we're both. Are you on the TCC technically? Someone
No, I'm not.
Which areas? Yeah, so for example, if I were to volunteer, could you kill two birds with one stone? Or it has to be, if I represent the county bike group, someone else from TransPAC has to go and from a TCC level representation, I guess. Just clarification, I guess.
I think our preference would be to have, the original way that this was constructed was to have 2 members from each RTPC ultimately,
Okay.
with a CBPAC and a TCC membership underlying that. But TCC demurred, as you recall, and have stated they prefer a slightly different approach where they pull from a deeper bench, so to speak, of staff. Here, we're basically we're posing the same question. You could take the same approach, but we also think that there's a more direct nexus on this committee with the bike and pedestrian expertise, which Vision Zero caters to quite specifically. So I would say to your question about 2 birds and 1 stone, I think our preference, although we're not requiring it, would be to have, say, you plus another TransPAC
Okay, so
interested
you
member
want one separate
with
people
knowledgeable.
from each of the committees.
Correct.
And how big is this group ultimately? You're
There'll
envisioning?
be 13 members altogether.
Okay.
8 of them would be from the RTPCs. We have another 4 proposed, that 2 of them would be from the advocacy field, Bike East Bay. That's still to be determined based on invitation and interest. And then 2 who are research experts, such as usually Berkeley, but again, that's pending as well. The county, actually, I failed to mention this, or be clear about it, the county, we're reserving a seat because the county kind of covers all 4 regions within the county. So to my knowledge, Monish Sen has already been offered by Mr. Fahey at TCC. So we have his name, at least in pencil, and we'll be reaching out to him.
All right, I'll just volunteer for Central County in this case. I know at TCC, the traffic engineer for Walnut Creek was offered as a possible volunteer, but we'll figure that one out at TransPAC. But I can volunteer from this group.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that too. So the county, it would be a separate seat. So I wouldn't be eligible for like a CBPAC position or anything like that. Or what would I guess would Monish just pretty much cover the county's rep position?
Yeah, that's what we foresee.
Okay. Paul, do you have a comment?
I was just going to propose if it becomes indeed difficult to find a volunteer from this committee from each of the RTPCs, I was going to propose that we just find 4 volunteers from this committee. But I do think it's important that we have 4 volunteers from this committee, not from staffs or colleagues of the committee. I think it's important that we have the continuity of this committee. That's all.
All right, thank you. Bill?
I think already we've got a fair spread. I'm West County, Central, and Ole, I guess, would be East County or something like that. Yeah, so that's 3. We don't have a cell.
And that brings up a final point. SWAT is in the process of reappointing its CBPAC members. As you noticed, there's a couple empty chairs, but they're getting to that point. So we could reserve that nominate. CCTA staff could follow up directly with SWAT to learn of who they may wish to answer this call.
Bruce?
I don't feel the need to be a formal member of this committee, but I would like to be able to attend the meetings and hear what gets said and speak as a member of the public. But if it's a working group, that probably couldn't happen.
Was there also I think James mentioned there's also a Bike East Bay possible member of this working group?
That's correct.
So maybe Ole could volunteer for that position or be nominated for that position? That
Yeah, I could. However,
It's up to
Dave-
Bike East Bay, of course.
yeah, Bike East Bay is breaking in a new advocacy staff person who would probably get the nod
Oh, okay.
from them. Not that this is bad, but I still would like to be able to attend these meetings. And since Paul wants to be on it, I certainly don't want to be in the situation of fighting over whether Paul or I get to be on the committee, because Paul has far more skill than I do. I'm just an end user. I'm trying not to get run over.
Corey?
Just a sort of point of order. How many people are on this body?
11.
11?
Yeah.
Okay, so 4 could easily, 4, and then if you're on there for the county, so as long as we stay under 5, it'll be okay. I'm thinking of the Brown Act, sorry.
Very short today, sort of small.
All right, any other questions or comments on the appointments?
Could you refresh my memory, who are being appointed right now?
Okay, I have on the list here, I have Bill Pinkham for West County, Eric Hugh for Central County, and you, Paul Reinders, for East County. And I still have whoever the SWAT representative to the CBPAC.
And I do know that we were intending on talking about this at the West County TAC. Is it okay if we have that discussion there? I mean, I don't foresee any opposition, but I just want to make sure that I'm not going over the head of my executive director or whatever.
Oh, so we might present it to the committee, and then other people might want to
Yeah,
do it.
I believe it's an agenda item on our upcoming October
Okay.
meeting.
All right. Well, fine. I'll volunteer, and then somebody else wants to, feels a great need to.
Sure, I'm just being parliamentary here and just making sure that 'cause I know that was something we wanted to discuss. Okay.
Actually, now that they put it that way, I mean, is there a deadline to nominate and select members, or is that something we go back to our respective TACs or RTBCs to discuss?
To keep the scope of work on schedule, at least in the initial stages, we would appreciate this item being addressed at the next opportunity. And as far as we know, RTPC tax, I believe TransPAC meets at the end of this week, if I'm not mistaken. And then all the others have October meetings. So that tracks with our scope of work. But any delay beyond that to making a decision would have an adverse impact.
Oh, that, and the other question is this membership? Does it have to be like approved by a board, or can just the TAC?
No, the authority board has, by virtue of making this an implementation priority, we intend to. They've already approved the scope of work.
Okay.
So we intend to act on it, and this is one way of carrying out this particular task, which is just to basically formalize the recruitment of the working group.
Oh, actually, sorry, I had to rephrase my question. I mean, does the RTPC boards, like say for West County here, like WICTAC, if they're going to discuss at their next TAC meeting, does it need to go to the board for the WICTAC board for any kind of approval?
That would be at their discretion.
Okay,
If each of the TACs feel that they are more comfortable forwarding these nominations under board direction, then that's fine. Because that way, we're not trying to negotiate who should be the chosen representative. So we'll defer to those boards.
Okay. Bruce?
Could we have alternates appointed so that if anybody who was appointed missed, the alternate could then sit in? Not just an alternate for one person, but an alternate to the committee.
That's not what we are recommending at this point because it is already a fairly large group, and unless there is strong opinion otherwise from the committee, we would prefer to proceed with the initial appointments.
Paul?
But if the alternate only attends if the regular appointed member cannot attend, you're not going to increase the size of the group.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. I'm not necessarily going to preclude the option, but I'm just stating that we can take alternates if that's the preference of the group. You can pitch it to your board that way.
Corey?
Obviously, there's a lot of enthusiasm in this group for this project. It's a great project. I mean, like a countywide Vision Zero project is awesome, especially if it's something that the local jurisdictions can use and implement at a countywide level. It's great. Is the Vision Zero plan going to come back for review to this body before it gets finally approved? Because if there are people who are enthusiastic, you will still be able to give input if it does come to this this body.
Yeah, we fully intend. We've even scoped presentation to the RTPCs themselves, in addition to this committee and the TCC, and eventually the Planning Committee and Authority Board, because it would have CCTA's stamp on it when it's completed.
All right, Bill?
You mentioned you wanted it done by the October meeting, but I might remind you that our next meeting is in November. So what I would suggest is that we get this firmed up now.
Well, just to clarify, I hope I did not misstate, but we're thinking of October meetings for the TAC, or October TAC meetings and October RTPC board meetings are fine.
I thought you meant us.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions or comments? So I guess, James, the question is if you could give some direction on how, to select volunteers. Is it something we just go back to our tax, or should we just choose, first, because some of it seems like some of the sub-regions, RTBCs want to select now, and some want to bring it back to their tax. So what would you suggest how we deal with this?
It appears that it's a relatively organized fashion to be able to present it to the RTPCs so that there's concurrence and agreement, and I think that's cleaner. And then CCTA staff will follow up with each of the RTPC administrative staff to find out what the board action was so that we can officially start scheduling and bringing everyone on board.
Okay, all right, we'll do that then. So, Paul?
Yeah, I guess I'm confused, though. If we take this to the RTPCs, are they going to be nominating members of this Vision Zero committee or working group from this committee, advisory committee? It sounds to me like we're going to get 2 nominations from each TAC, whether they're beyond the TCC or the CBAC. It won't matter. And that's what I'm wondering. I'd like to see this committee nominate the representatives to the Vision Zero. Is that possible?
And actually, I think about it. Paul has a good point, because if you want 4 CBPAC members, it's not. Yeah, or just that. Why even bring it back? No, I think about it more. Why even bring it back to the TAC if? Yeah, but at the same time, I guess it's because like say for East County and West County, you have between you.
But again, Ole's not on the RTPC, so it's a kind of a moot point for East County.
Okay, no, I understand. And
I think this committee needs to decide whether we want to keep this as 4 nominations from this committee, or if we want to go deeper like the TCC did. That's, I think, a question I think we want to answer first.
And I think the whole thing with taking it back to the RTPCs was coming from me. I just know that we were starting to figure out what our agenda for the next TAC is going to be, and this was on there. So I don't know. I was just a little hesitant on making an action without really knowing what the intent of
and that's fair.
Our executive director and our TAC is.
We don't know what SWAT. Who is who's on this committee that represents SWAT? Are there 2?
There would be a staff primary, a staff alternate, and a citizen rep. As we understand, they are making those decisions at their next board meeting in October.
And that would be when we could finalize our nominations to this Vision Zero. Right?
Correct. But I think, absent SWAT, I think we could still, there's still the three other volunteers, and that's still just the question. Can it be decided here, or do we have to go back to the RTPCs?
I think we decided. It doesn't have to go back to the RTPC.
We did decide.
Yeah, I think it's decided. We have three volunteers currently. Yeah, we currently have three volunteers from each of from three RTPCs from CBPAC. And if this committee wants to forward that to staff, that three list, the three people, then that's it.
Okay, so I guess the only question, I guess, is really for West County, if it's, if Corey or Bill.
I will concede.
Well, is that something we could just, the West County rep, can they just inform you offline about that? Like they're...
Yeah, it's the way I see it is that you can make a nomination here, and it's really a formality to inform the board, the TAC and the board, that we're proposing this selection, perhaps as a consent item.
So I was hesitant to do it because it's going to be on our October agenda, but if the decision here is that the nominations aren't coming from the RTPCs, the nominations are coming from this group, then that's fine. If it's between me and Bill wants to do it, have Bill do it,
Otherwise, I'll arm wrestle whoever.
Right.
Well,
and it doesn't have to go to the RTPCs. I'm fine with Bill doing it.
WCTAC's decision, I believe, to pick somebody is for the TCC rep.
Right. I think so.
Yeah, it is. That's what we decided at TCC. So
Okay.
it's going to be the second member from WCTAC that they're taking
Then
action.
that's fine. Have Bill.
Okay, from, I guess, any other questions, comments? It seems like I guess it's been decided for West County, Bill Pinkham, Central County, Eric Hu, and East County, Paul Reinders, and then the SWAT rep is still TBD. So I think, so that should be the nominations for the Vision Zero working group from the CBPAC.
Yeah, thank you all for helping us form this group.
Right. Okay, we'll go on to, maybe we'll finish this up here. We'll go to item 3.0, other business. James, is there any other announcements or anything?
Just one brief announcement. On behalf of the authority, our Deputy Executive Director of Planning, Martin Engelman, has announced his retirement, for those who are not already aware. And so he has contributed 29 years to this agency and helped form the state's first growth management program, among many other accomplishments. So we have very, very big shoes to fill, but we wish him well in his next endeavor. But that's simply for this committee's information. So if you see him, feel free to shake his hand and wish him well.
All right, thank you. Actually, no, I'm just looking ahead at the agenda. It says adjournment to next meeting on November 25th, 2019. I'm just curious, that Thanksgiving week, because I wonder if that might be an issue for some people here.
That is the Monday. That is 3 days before the Thanksgiving holiday. So staff did consider a couple different options for this committee. You may, of course, we can schedule, once we know the SWAT representatives, we can send out an email to get an early indication of attendance. Unless you already know it now, we're happy to take feedback now if you know that you will be unavailable. The committee could also decide to postpone or reschedule the meeting. So if it was to be postponed, then the next opportunity would be the fourth Monday in January of 2020 to reschedule. One idea could be the first week in December, which would be after the Thanksgiving holiday, because earlier in November, staff already have conflicts on the Mondays at this hour. So I'll leave it for discussion.
Okay, anybody have any questions or comments on that? Eric?
I mean, for one, I know I'm not going to be here on the 25th.
Okay, Court?
I'll be here.
All right. I plan on being here. Bill, Bruce, you know.
And we could also, I mean, it's helpful to get early indications. We can also send out an email reminder, and if we really cannot achieve a quorum, even with the new appointment from SWAT, we'll advise accordingly.
Yeah, why don't you, after the SWAT representatives are selected, maybe sending out a follow-up email, because we all say we're free now, but who knows in the next month or two.
And we could indicate for the record now if this committee is willing to give the chair the authority to authorize a rescheduled meeting, if that would be better to achieve a quorum.
Okay. Oh, is that? I guess what's the? I'm sorry.
That's a prompt. So if the committee is comfortable, we could confer with the chair. If we cannot achieve a quorum at this November 25th, you would have authority to assign another date shortly thereafter.
Okay.
And we could send another survey out to see if people are available.
That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Actually, I do have one other question, just an update. I know this came up at one of the previous CBPAC meetings. Are there any updates or words on any of the implementation actions from the Countywide Bike Ped Plan update? I recall one with the shared mobility. I think we were supposed to have some kind of more detailed, in-depth discussion about that. Is there any update on that?
Yeah, we are finalizing. Well, we have finalized the scope of work. Working with PlaceWorks to help set up a half-day seminar later this fall to host representatives from each of the local jurisdictions to discuss micromobility at large, bike share, scooter share, and it would be akin to, some of you may have attended or be familiar with planning director meetings where it's an information exchange for best practices and sometimes legislative updates depending on the nature of the items of interest. But in this case, we are hoping to invite colleagues from Alameda and San Francisco County, for example, and to discuss ways that local jurisdictions could prepare for, in the eventuality that micromobility options become available in their cities and the county. We understand the market is relatively sparse right now in Contra Costa, but we believe that it is an opportune time to be aware of and plan for that type of eventuality.
Okay, thank you. All right, any of the committee members have any other comments, questions? Bill?
Just an announcement, since it comes before the November meeting, if we're holding it then, Bike East Bay's winter event, Biketopia, is on November 14th. Usually downtown Oakland at what is that hub? But get the details from them later. It's in the evening. Yeah. Anyway, 14th.
All right, thank you, Bill. Looks like we don't have any more comments from the committee, so we'll adjourn to the next meeting. I guess as of now, it's scheduled for Monday, November 25th, 2019, but I'll work with James update everyone if there's going to be a change with that date. All right, thank you.